Welcome to The Doc Analyzes Anything, where psychology and science meet to explain human behavior, including, spin the wheel, excessive use of the phrase, get all my ducks in a row.
So, real quick, I think we're going to have to name that wheel something. You've invented this wheel. We've got this fancy wheel that names random weird behaviors. Is it like the behavioromatic 5000, or I got to come up with something for people?
I think that we go with the first thing that comes to your head. So the behavioromatic 5000 is great.
Perfect.
Is excessively using the phrase "get all my ducks in a row" considered an odd behavior? I guess if you use it all the time,
it would certainly be annoying.
It'd be scenario based. If you just so happen to be in a spot where you are always getting your ducks in a row, then I think it's appropriate.
I think it's only appropriate if
you're extrapolating it to things that don't fully apply, then you question it.
Erroneous. It is only acceptable when you have literal ducks that you're putting in a row. No.
I'm a duck farmer. Hang on, I have to go get these ducks in a row.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. Stephen Sparks, here with my co-host, Kyle Steury. And with us once again is veterinarian Dr. Brad Clements. He's here to, ask the questions that maybe the lay audience may have for us, or to say, hey, dummies, we don't know what that means. Explain it better. And so while he may not be able to do a functional analysis, he is the only one here who's been elbow deep in a dairy cow. So there's that.
You probably know a lot about ducks.
Yeah. I did for my boards. I mean, I'll be honest, there were certain species for my board exams where, in studying them, I prayed that the two questions I'd have based on that species were the pieces of information that I managed to stick.
I should apologize. If anybody knows about getting ducks in a row in this room, it would be you. So there you go. The one apology you get this year. That's it.
Okay, actually, no. A quick note with the getting ducks in a row. So the animal behaviorist, Conrad Lorenz, we can bring him into the idea here as far as imprinting on young individuals. In his case, it was ducks, where he became mother duck because they were the first thing that they saw. And so my favorite picture that I want to one day have framed is Conrad Lorenz walking with his pipe in his mouth with his ducks in a row behind him.
I like it.
We need to get off this topic, but so are you saying that due to imprinting, you would expect the ducks to automatically get in the row, or are just because they imprinted on mom, now mom has to work her ass off to get her little ducklings in a row?
They just follow in the row. Little ducklings wanted to follow Mama Conrad around everywhere.
So it's not like little baby Steve knocking the other kids in the way because he wants to be in the front of the line. It's just you just jump in line, no problem.
Oh, there's order. The pecking order, if you will.
Oh, that must be where that comes from.
We are solving life's mysteries right now.
I don't even think we need to go on with the rest of the episode. Like we just made the episode right there.
I learned a lot, and it's been really good talking to you guys.
See you later. So after we did the first episode, I realized we didn't explain who we are or why we have any business talking about these things with you. And if you're anything like me, you're probably thinking, who the hell is this guy and why does he think he gets to analyze things? So I'll give you a little bit of background here. Last 13 years or so, I've spent assessing, analyzing, and developing behavior plans for some of the most severe behavior in our area, our state, our region, what have you. Started a company in 2016, brought more people on so we could help more people. And our specialty really has become kind of those, we'll work with anybody. It could be, someone just, a child that has some behavior issues, but our specialty is those most extreme situations. So homicidal behaviors, suicidal behaviors, sexual deviant behavior, severe self-injury. Those are sort of the things that we really specialize in. So we have some firsthand knowledge of some of the things we'll talk about in episodes, plus the conceptual and theoretical knowledge that we possess, mostly because our classes, and because if I could get paid to just be a theoretical behavior analyst, I'd probably just write theory and not actually work a day in my life. But nobody cares enough to actually hear about those sort of things. No. And then Kyle joined the team a while back, and so he knows the stuff from the writing and assessing side of things as well. And now has taken over kind of our, what are we calling this? Our learning education.
Outreach project, continuing ed project, training. I don't know. Lots of words.
So
word bubble.
He was a natural fit for this because he's already doing some of this work with us and has the background. Plus, he's a real life crab person, which somehow helps him as well. So there's always that. I have like 5 people have seen that, like those South Park episodes, and actually know the reference there. So for you 5, thank you for giggling a little bit, maybe.
I unfortunately understood it. I don't know what that says about me, but I did get it.
All right. So, go ahead.
Oh, disclaimer first?
Yeah, do disclaimers.
Yeah. On that note, disclaimer. Remember, we're here for curiosity and conversation, not clinical consultation. We break down behavior the best we can from a deterministic, science-based perspective for education and, most importantly, entertainment purposes only. Nothing you hear should be taken as personal advice, diagnosis, or treatment. So relax, enjoy our analysis, and consult qualified professionals for any individual concerns.
Yeah, so basically, because we do this work, people may think, hey, they're giving me a real assessment of what's going on with this sort of thing. But we'd actually have to be there in person, looking at it, analyzing it, doing a usually 10 to 20 hour process to even figure what's going on before we design the plan. So if you think, hey, I have a good idea of what's going on because of what we talk about here, you don't. You have some basic information of what could potentially be going on, but do not trust that. Hire someone if you need it, because more than anything else, I don't want to be sued. So thank you.
That's good. We just got our ducks in a row there.
Yeah.
I'm gonna use it the whole episode, man.
The callback. That's today's callback.
Yeah, I'm gonna start talking about geese or something at some point and be completely confused of what we were talking about.
Did you say keystring?
Geese.
I was like, oh my gosh, what a day.
That is a different episode. Probably the incarceration episode. Who knows? We'll look into it.
All right, I digress.
I don't know this. I don't know this reference.
Oh, what was that movie with Will Ferrell and Get Hard?
Get Hard with
Get Hard, and Kevin Hart's teaching him how to be like a tough guy, and he's like, you're gonna go to prison. He's like, financial crimes, whatever. You have to learn to keister things. So hide them in your anus so you can sneak them around.
I thought you said keystring. Okay. Oh, yeah, keystering. Okay.
Keystering. And so
at one point, like a string with a key on it.
At one point, that the bad guy comes in the room, and all of a sudden, Will Ferrell has a gun. They're like, "Where'd you get the gun?" He's like, "I keistered it." So there, yeah.
Perfect. Another episode. What's our topic today, though? It's not keystering.
It is cults. We thought we'd get into something maybe more people find interesting than our first conversation about how you have no free will and you are all just mindless zombies. And we'll get into...
It sounds like very cultish language, though.
And that's, I think, what we'll really see here with a lot of things is there's a lot of subjectivity in what is a cult, what is a normal societal group or societal norm. We'll try not to alienate anybody, but also talk about like the division between religion and a cult. And then we'll get into talking to some actual cults. We'll see if we talk too long. This might end up being a 2-parter, which I know I always hate when my podcasts are 2 parts, but also I can't imagine anybody listening to my voice for more than an hour at a time. And so we'll see how it goes.
It'll be a cliffhanger.
Right.
Yeah. You have to think of the perfect cliffhanger, though, along the way.
We got all our ducks. Never mind. No more ducks. I'm done.
That's more of like a lemming than a duck conversation.
Yeah. There you go.
I'm thinking just mid word, you just cut it off.
I was gonna say that, yeah, mid word or mid sentence. Actually, I was going a little bit simpler, but you're going straight.
Yep.
Lost connection.
And,
What? I guess it wouldn't fit very culty, but kind of like where all of a sudden like the warning like thing pops up on TVs. Have it be like that.
yeah.
Just end the episode with that sound.
We'll be talking about Heaven's Gate and just making an alien noise in the background and then cut it off.
Yeah, and then static.
Individual pans on each of our faces, and then
I think the horror in our eyes is something is occurring behind the camera.
I can define cult from the Dictionary of Psychology, the APA Dictionary of Psychology. So you said this, a religious or quasi-religious group characterized by unusual or atypical beliefs, seclusion from the outside world, and authoritarian structure. Cults tend to be highly cohesive, well-organized, secretive, and hostile to non-members.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, it's subjective. And what, to me, really sets a cult apart is the fact that they tend to be either less or not at all socially acceptable. Like they're the little integration into society whatsoever because their social norms are so different. I was going to say they tend to take advantage or have more exploitation, but even though major organized religions probably don't do that, you will see different groups who claim to be doing the work under those larger organized religions who still exploit people. And so I don't think that's a clear division there. You know, there's a lot of people doing bad things in the name of their religion.
Yeah. And there's like common vernacular too, like a sports fan might be quote unquote member of a cult as far as like that team goes.
Yeah.
But that's
the cult following of something like the Big Lebowski.
Yeah, or a band in general, or the Indianapolis Colts.
Or the band, the Cult, is that what you were getting at? Yeah.
I was, yeah. Or Colts. I saw a band called Colts a few weeks ago. They played in Indianapolis, but they didn't make any Indianapolis Colts jokes. Well, but it's fine. I digress.
Quick question then, because you're talking, I mean, there's some like religious aspects to it, some of them, and then some of them are just from like a group following. But then are you guys familiar with the Sawney Bean family of like early, like, I'm not sure what century Europe it would have been, but they were like a family that turned kind of like quote unquote what I feel like me and some other individuals would think it's like somewhat kind of culty, but they just like dissociated completely from society and then had their own normal. But it was a lot of are you guys familiar with it at all?
No. I don't know that one, no.
Okay, so it's practically like The Hills Have Eyes, those movies. It's kind of like who that was based off of is Sawney Bean. So would that technically like kind of fall into the realm?
So, I mean, I think you're talking about behavior of a group and bringing new people into the group. You could definitely say it's cult-like behavior, but I do think that for it to be a true cult, there has to be a religious aspect, even though they may not start that way. And so talking about like, we'll talk about later, but like the Twin Flames thing that's been going on here in Michigan, and it's, you know, across the country, but they're based here in Michigan. That did not start out religious at all. But by the end, it became very much a religion, and kind of the leader went from just being a normal guy to like seeing himself or portraying himself as a deity, which is interesting. And so you can't say, you don't ever want to overgeneralize too much, but there always tends to be power, sex, and some level of like religion involved some way, somehow, as things progress. And I think most of the time these things probably start off fairly innocently. You just have a charismatic leader that everybody's like, hey, this person makes a lot of sense. And then as it progresses, it's like the power. I don't like using the metaphor, but like power goes to the head. You know, have you ever heard of the Nobel disease?
Yes.
It's really interesting, and I think without trying to digress too much, like basically what we've seen with people like, Elon Musk, where you get to this power, people tell you how intelligent you are, you have all of these great ideas that tend to be working out. And it's a very strange phenomenon where a lot of people who have won the Nobel Prize, once they win that prize, think that they are so intelligent that every idea they have is some amazing, profound idea. And so they'll end up spending a good portion of their life writing, talking about like weird supernatural things, like ghosts following them around, things that scientifically make zero sense, even though they had originally, made their mark on society based on the scientific knowledge or area of study. And so I think what we see a lot of times in these cults is the same sort of thing, where you have the power, you have the influence, all these people think you're that great, and you start to like talk yourself into believing, oh, I must actually be this great, must be this powerful, and it's like a natural snowball. We see it, I guess, everywhere in history too. Like, who knows how crazy and how horrible a person Hitler was at the beginning, but once he gained that power, like the first few years of his power, people were doing pretty well, and there wasn't a whole lot of talk about him, wiping people off the earth and destroying and, war. It was just about helping his people. And then it seems like maybe just once that power went to his head, now it's like, nope, I am a deity, I am the all-powerful, and I need to cleanse this of this crazy idea that I've come up with. You know what I mean?
I think there's a good talk in and of itself of just like people who are very confident, coupled with folks who are maybe more vulnerable too. So like thinking of the elements of a cult, people who are more at high risk of joining cults. There's a list of people with drug or alcohol problems, trauma, unresolved sexual issues, phobias, learning and communication disorders. Like a couple of things where you are looking for something to feel more complete, or like somebody who shows up and can kind of just tell you that the world can be better if you just do these things. It's probably some element of people a lot of times are like, oh, they just got sucked in the rabbit trail, or went down the rabbit hole, or whatever the phrase is. But there's probably a lot of like elements that make it kind of an equation, like, hey, this and this is a bad combo for this outcome.
Did you just mix up Rabbit Hole and Peter
I did.
Cottontail's song "Hopping Down the Bunny Trail"?
No, I did mix up two phrases, but I did not that song. I'm unfamiliar with that song. I mixed up the phrase going down the rabbit hole and sucked into, or just getting sucked
Be
in.
careful.
Just getting sucked in. I got sucked in. That's what it was.
Sucked in the rabbit hole. All right.
It's a vortex. It's a vacuum.
Yeah, I think we tend to think of people that are in a vulnerable position too, but sometimes if you just are out there and hear something that makes a ton of sense to you and you follow it, even if it's ridiculous to you or other parts of it are ridiculous to you in the moment, it can become logical. It's kind of like telling a story over the years, and I have this one story with my friends. I don't know if I should actually get into the detail because it's a bit of a wild ride. Telling the story 10 years later with everybody, and it's actually more like 20 years later now, and everybody's got a little bit of different version or a significantly different version. And like I've told this story many, many times across a lot of different scenarios, and I'm sure the story that I'm remembering, I can picture it, is how it happened. But because little nuanced changes happen here and there, it's very likely that my memory is very different than how it actually occurred, and that none of the five of us actually remember it just the way it happened. And so we've created a new reality that is very real to each of us individually, but does not work like together. And so if you're sitting there around someone, maybe you're attracted to them, maybe you just think they're very smart, what have you, and that you're hearing lots and lots and lots of it. At first, it might seem ridiculous, and then it'll start making more and more and more sense. And so sure, we see a lot of people that are trying to find a place to belong, something to latch on to, especially getting into the twin flames. We're talking about people that are lonely and are looking for love, and find people that are telling them, nope, you are worthy and you'll find it, and getting sucked in to that circle there. But I'm sure, and they even said, if people aren't familiar with the documentary on Netflix, like, it seemed ridiculous to them until they were just surrounded by it, and then it didn't seem so ridiculous until you look back at it.
And you want to walk through kind of like what their whole shtick is, because it's gone
Yeah.
from like, it hasn't gone like basically from like an MLM to like full blown.
Yeah, kind of. So it's interesting, actually. The guy, he goes by Jeff Devine now, but it was, I think, I don't know exactly how to spell his name, but let's see, it was Ion, I think, Jeffrey Ion. So he grew up like 20 minutes, 30 minutes north of where I grew up. We were actually at Western Michigan University in undergrad at the same time. I probably had drinks with the guy at the bar and don't even remember it, that sort of thing. Studying business, goes off and seems to be like, after school, decided he was going to try to find the spiritualness that he was missing or something along those lines. But he sold his stuff, moved out to this place in California. It almost sounds, I don't know exactly what it was. They called it a substance farm. So I'm thinking almost like a commune type situation, but I don't know for sure. And eventually, time goes on, meets this girl that he, like, online. She was a Reiki healer, photographer, and psychic. They fall in love and started just a YouTube channel about love and connections. After some time, they had like over 10,000 followers, 20,000 followers, what have you. They turned it into a business. All right, join this, send us your money. We're going to give you trainings. We're going to have different situations. We'll do counseling and help you find your twin flame, that one person that's out there for you. Now, with 8 billion people in the world or whatever we're at now, if there's really only one person out there for you, I'm surprised any of us paired up in state. Like, we wouldn't have only, and I say only, but still, like, what, a little over half of marriages end in divorce. If there's like one person out there for you, it'd be like 99%. But
Right.
that can be another episode too. We'll talk about love and my twisted view of it scientifically at some point.
Yes, please.
So yeah, this guy, like, they're in Metro Detroit at this point, setting this thing up, and it just started off like, all right, have the confidence, go find this person, and start getting a little weird with, like, okay, one lady, this guy's like, want nothing to do with her at all. Like, we talked for a little bit, didn't work out. And they're like, no, that is your twin flame. We can tell that's the person, which is like, this starts getting weird. Like, all right, you're actually identifying this person for me now. It was like a matching app, except it was like, nope, definitively, this is the person for you. You can't look anywhere else.
Oh, man.
And
so how do they, or you might be getting into it, but like they don't take kindly to the pushback that they would receive from some of the individuals, like, I assume?
It started out with like almost like an overconfidence. Like, we need to sell this product. It has to be real. We need you to believe that we can find your twin flame for you, sort of thing. You know what I mean? And so there were other situations where, like, it was an abusive situation. They're like, nope, that person's right for you. And someone stayed in a relationship they shouldn't have. There were some other bad things, but this one in particular, the guy went as far as get a restraining order, and they're still telling her, nope, that is your twin flame. You have to go for it. You have to be assertive. And like, she's gets arrested, goes to jail, and like, oh, they disappear now. They don't have your back anymore now that you're being arrested for violating this protection order. And she knew at the time that, like, hey, this probably isn't a good idea, but she believed in this program so much, and that they had helped her find her one true love, that she had to go for it at all costs. And I mean, it cost her everything. And it kept snowballing from there, where at one point, randomly assigning people and lining up with random people, whether or not they were interested in them or not. Originally saying, nope, we have this test, we know for sure. And that's when it started becoming more of a religion thing. Like, these people are their spiritual leaders that know how to tell who is meant for one another. After some controversy, things got a little weird. Some people left, and they only had so many people to match up with others. And probably due to the fact that they really speak to the romance of it, the side of, like, you know, winning over the heart. It tended to draw in more cisgender female members than male, and they started getting, like, you know, kind of in trouble. They're like, all right, who are we going to match these people up with now? And so by the end, and I apologize if someone wanted to watch the documentary and not have it ruined, you probably should have stopped 10 minutes ago, but
Fast forward
regardless,
30 seconds.
definitely stop now. But they actually started, according to these people being interviewed that were previous members of the group, reassigning gender to people. And so, like, you are a man now, you get to stay as a woman. And the people being interviewed be like, I didn't feel like a man. I still felt like a cisgendered female, heterosexual cisgender female, but nope, you're a man now, and now you match up with this woman. And people were actually getting married because these spiritual leaders who were acting like they were deities were telling them, nope, this is your true flame, and you are now the other gender. And it is still going on. They've taken themselves out of the limelight significantly since at least since the Netflix special, but I think because the FBI was looking into it too, because they also got extremely wealthy from this. I mean, while this is all going on, people are sending them all their money for these programs and making them go to retreats to be part of the group, spending tens of thousands of dollars, and then, like, he's putting on social media his wife's new Chanel bag and his new Ferrari and things like this.
So actually, you saying the fact that he was a business major, I mean, how much of some of these leaders of these cults start off where they're just trying to improve their status of where they stand in society, and then they're able to see that they are building this following. And so, do you think any of these have ever hit a point where they're like, well, this was meant to be just to further me, but I feel like I have to fully commit to this now? Or just how, like, what do you think runs through the minds of these individuals?
First of all, never use the word mind around me. No, I'm joking, but
brain.
The mind as a metaphor, I know I talked about it before. We'll have a whole bunch of conversations about that in the future. So it's kind of a joke for you all, but also there's nobody pulling my strings anyways. I think that you're going to find a wide array of things. You know what I mean? These people, I feel like they sold the lie. They had to stick with it regardless of how, like, dirty it was getting, how messy it was getting. And then after so much time of repeating it to themselves and probably trying to justify it to themselves, it became real to them. It became natural. You know what I mean? Like, whereas if you're talking about the Manson family, for instance, he was probably always out there enough that he never really questioned what he was doing, what he was like, what his thoughts were. There's some conjecture whether or not he was actually part of some of the CIA mind control LSD experiments. Because supposedly his probation officer was making him go to the clinic where some of those were done. But again, that may just be conspiracy theory. I don't know, and I don't like to dive too deep into conspiracy theories. But the dude was never all right, and so whether or not I don't assume that he ever had those thoughts like, okay, this is just for my well-being. I think he believed it wholeheartedly, like, the entire time he was going through it. But I think of it like in terms of even getting up and trying to do, like, you know, theoretical science. And the whole time you're like, all right, am I really on the ball here? Am I really making sense? Or am I just talking in a way that may draw people in, but it's not a full-on conclusion that I should be making, you know? And that's why I think in science, we always try to discuss things in terms of probabilities. Like, the most likely reason that this occurs is due to this, you know. due to the nature of gravity, we know how gravity works here on Earth. The laws of gravity are very specific to Earth, but celestial bodies, depending on the model, either the universe would have collapsed it back in itself or expanded much further at this point if the laws of gravity worked exactly how we understand them here on Earth. And so all we can say is the theory of gravity, and to the best of our knowledge, this is how it works, rather than saying, hey, this is how it works. It's gravity. It's just what it is. You know what I mean? And so I would never think that as a scientist we should talk in definitiveness whatsoever. But I also would assume, to tie it back in, that you'd have to be questioning yourself anytime you're making, statements you're setting basically a rule or a law or a definition of something like that. Like, this is how this works.
Mm-hmm.
It would seem like you'd almost have to question that the whole time. You know what I mean?
Okay.
On that note, two things. When I was a kid, I thought it would be fun to read the book Helter Skelter, which is all about the Manson family. Fun little part about how they used to practice before the actual massacre took place, by just sneaking into people's houses, trying not to get caught, just making sure that they knew how to hide under beds, sleep under people's beds, and sneak back out without being caught. That was real fun reading as a 12-year-old in the middle of the night in my own bedroom. Two, what kind of, I'm just thinking of like a behavioral analysis of this now. So I'm sure you've got lots of thoughts on this, Steve, but what kind of MOs and reinforcers are we dealing with here?
You talk about Manson family specifically, kind of get
You want to
rolling.
break down individual cults? We can do that.
I think we should do it a little bit, because I don't think it's always the same. You know what I mean? Like purely religious. If we talk about Waco or Jonestown, where it was a religious leader that then went down the rabbit hole. Twin Flames, we're talking about, okay, it was a love support group that went a little crazy on us, and now we're talking about a person that it was the hippie culture that went different. And so I think breaking it down separately hopefully will be more interesting for people, and I don't know if you can really talk about it with one versus without talking about the other. You know what I mean? Like, they don't.
Yeah.
There's not going to be a perfect amount of overlap between one group and another, but there is a lot of overlap between all the groups. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So another interesting story. My uncle was actually a prison guard for Charles Manson at the California Medical Facility at Vacaville. I think that's how you pronounce it. And so I learned quite a bit about Charles Manson growing up just from him telling me stories and things like that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
is Charles Manson still alive?
No, he died. I don't know how many years ago was that.
I want to say it was in the 20 teens.
Well, let's look it up, because I like to pretend like I just know things off the top of my head. 2017.
At the ripe age of 83.
Yeah. So, yeah.
What was he like? What are the stories?
My uncle said he was as out there and wild and crazy as you would expect. Give you a little bit of background. This was like the hospital where you went if you had severe medical issues or mental health issues. So as part of the prison system, my uncle was also a prison guard some other places after this or before this. I'm not sure exactly what. But kind of paint you a picture of who Uncle Gary was first, because I think it adds to the story. My Uncle Gary Thor was his last name, and he looked kind of like Yosemite Sam. I mean, my dad, 6'1"-ish, big guy, at least, considering we're getting bigger now, he may not sound that big, but back in the 70s when he was young, he was one of the bigger guys in school.
Sure.
If he got in a skirmish and the other guys would be like, oh, I'm going to go get my older brother, he'd be like, all right, just tell him my older brother is Gary Thor. Gary was like 5'7", 5'8". And my dad said every single time the kid would come back and apologize. Because no matter how big the big brother was, Gary was just that mean, rough and tumble.
Yeah.
rough guy. And so he had the long, like 6-inch on each side, handlebar mustache, cowboy hat, got out of the military, got a job in corrections because he didn't really know what he was going to do. And my family was very much the hunters, outdoors people. And at one point, my uncle actually had a gun shop out in California. And so he said that Charlie was friendly with him. He tried to pay him respect. He wasn't trying to be, mean to the guy, especially because you could tell he was just out there. You never knew what followers were where, what was going on. And so Manson actually asked him to be a lieutenant in his neo-Nazi army.
Oh, wow.
And my uncle, tongue-in-cheek, responded like, "Hey, listen, I can't do it. They're gonna, no." He says, "I'll only do it if you make me a general."
Yeah.
So it laughed at him basically, and then he's like, then I thought about it, like, that probably wasn't the best idea. So I went back to him the next time. Listen, Charlie, I'm honored that you would ask me to do that, but really, they'll kick me out of the NRA, and I'm really into my guns, and so I just can't do that. And so he said, Manson was very understanding that you're part of this other group, and that is your thing, and so they did not have any strife for him, but he said, in his words, the guy was just bad shit. I mean, like, just nothing he said was really based in reality. He did answer every letter that was sent to him, supposedly, at least during that time. And so my aunt, who is my dad and my uncle's sister, wrote him a letter and got a letter back at one point. But this is one of those situations where I don't think he was ever considering what was right, what was real. Once it became real in his head, it was real.
It's odd to think of him existing, because I wonder if he knew that he had kind of drifted into obscurity. Like, not that he wasn't known, but it wasn't like big news anymore. But like being isolated like that in prison for so long and still getting letters, like I wonder if he thought the effects of what he had done were still kind of resounding out in the halls of society or not.
Well, I mean, not all his followers or his people were arrested.
Right.
And what was it like? I think it was the 80s where one of his followers tried to assassinate Gerald Ford, or the 70s, late 70s, after he'd been in prison for years at this point. And so he probably thought his influence really was still out there to an extent. Plus, he was always happy to do an interview and bring himself back into the limelight, But look at the story. I mean, he was a drifter, a thief. He was like in and out of prison most of his life from like robberies and stuff like that. And he just happened to land, and maybe it was planned, but it seems like he just happened to land in San Francisco right during the hippie invasion. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And within months of arriving there, he met I don't know if he considered it a girlfriend or not, but a girlfriend, moved into her place, and then started bringing more young women from the hippie movement to stay with them, live with them. And he would just, use LSD and other drugs and just go on these long, trippy conversations about his beliefs and stuff. And I think first the mix of drugs and that sort of thing, the fact that they were all intertwined romantically in one way or another, and the fact that the dude just had a lot of charisma led to, these early followers joining and listening. And from there, I mean, obviously you have Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys kind of being part of the group, gaining influence there. I did not remember they actually recorded one of his songs and then put it out there as his own, supposedly, without giving him any credit. So that's why he hated the Beach Boys later on. The psychedelic drugs, there's a lot of use now in therapeutic exercises to help with anxiety and that sort of thing. But we've also seen, even in our own work, I've had consumers where people will tell you they had zero mental health history, used LSD or mushrooms or something of that sort, and then within months were diagnosed with schizophrenia. And so the level of delusion and being able to tell what's real or not, especially when you spend that much time in an altered state, it kind of, I think, will blur the lines, blend together quite a bit for those
Sure.
people. And I think the things he was saying and doing, he believed, and they started to believe very quickly.
What's going on when you start believing what you say? Like, is this just rule governed behavior? Like if I say anything wild, if I say it long enough and I start believing it, like what is that? Because this is a big part of cult and cult followings.
So that is probably its own episode sometime about what is memory. You know, I mean, what do we even talk about? People in society tend to talk about it almost in terms of like a computer disk, where you're like just loading data on there and it's there.
Sure.
Scientifically, though, you know, when we're looking at it from a behavioral standpoint, is repeated exposure basically builds it into your repertoire. And so you think about why you don't have memories between like before like 2, 3, 4 years old, or not very many. It's because you didn't have the language to relive and repeat these things to you over and over and over again. And as your language repertoire becomes stronger, the more you can repeat these things to yourself, the more memories you have, the stronger your memories get, that sort of thing. And it's why, you know, a little bit of a tangent, but I've been noticing this more and more with myself lately, and I think it might be just the age I'm approaching now, where I've learned and forgotten things multiple times at this point, where I'll see or hear something and I'm like, that seems new. And then the second time I hear or see it, I'm like, I know for a fact, but I knew that a long time ago. I didn't just learn this the other day, but I actually knew that at one point and forgot. And now it's like more familiar for me again. You know what I mean? Brad, do you ever get that?
Not a lot in school, I can tell you that.
No, but it's almost like deja vu. And it's happened mostly in the last 5 years, where I'm like, I have no idea who that guy is. And then like see him again talking about someone, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that guy from back when they did this way back in the day. I'm like, do I really, or did I just learn about it like 3 weeks ago and now think I remember it from back then? It's really weird phenomenon. But I do think, you know, the way that environmental stimuli, like the smell of a cigar, brings back a memory that I can't remember, but I have the feelings, the physical reaction to it. Like there was a family member that I had fun with or something like that, that brings back this warm feeling, even though no one in my family tends to remember who it was that smoked cigars. You know what I mean? So the ability to repeat things to ourselves and build these memories makes them kind of available to be influenced like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you change those small details, you repeat yourself. If all memory really is something being so salient that you can recall it when other stimuli in the environment are the same, and then repeated pairings and repeating those experiences yourself, whether it's a visual or self-talk or what have you, really makes it easy to then change your learning history, change your memories under the power of suggestion. But mostly when you don't know what's happening. Like if someone says, "Haha, I'm gonna change your memory right now. Watch this," you'd be like, "This is BS. That's not how it happened."
Yeah, right.
But someone plants that seed. No, this is really how it happened. You're like, "Was that really how it happened?" And then over time, it seems very much like how you get someone to, you know, admit to a crime they didn't commit. You know what I mean? Like false confessions. So listening to a crime junkie in the car the other day, and like, you can see why people be like, "Oh, I would never do that." But sitting there for hours, not really having a clear memory of what's going on because you're going through like a really intense situation. This one, the guy's girlfriend had been killed, and the police are sure he did it. So they're like, you know, you have all these stressors going on. You're sitting in this room for hours and hours and hours, and they're like, well, maybe you just blacked out and don't remember it. Like, maybe I did. I don't know. You know what I mean? And like they're creating this false memory where he gave a play-by-play of something that couldn't have physically happened. And that's why we think probably the guy wasn't guilty, but who knows? Because he created a false memory there. And so really, I think what we're talking about in terms of this is the same sort of thing where someone is facilitating and creating a false memory. And with the Manson family, specifically with the use of hallucinogenics, makes it that much easier.
I have a family member who, I don't know, is QAnon a cult? QAnon would be considered a cult.
It's
at least
it's a
very, central leader.
I don't think it's organized, but it may be. Like I haven't read enough. I know about their beliefs and understanding, but I don't know like if they said, all right, everybody show up here at this time, we're gonna storm the Capitol or something, whether or not they do it.
That would never happen.
That's ridiculous.
Well, I have a family member who still, I feel like it's kind of like lost momentum. Like there was a big upswing during COVID and then it's kind of lost momentum. I don't know. But this family member is still pretty active in that community. But like time and time again, like certain dates are supposed to have like huge meaning, and like on this date, something big is going to happen. I've been told probably 3 or 4 times in the last 3 or 4 years that like be ready, like stay inside on this date because it's gonna happen, or like the dollar is gonna be worthless. Like save up gold. We've got gold reserve now that we're gonna be using as currency, and none of this has come to fruition. But this person remains loyal to that central figure, like that tenant. And I've always had a hard time deciphering that. Like these contingencies aren't being followed through on, yet the adherence to the central tenants and the loyalty remains.
I think there is a lot of overlap between conspiracy theories and cults and that sort of thing. And going back to some of our earlier conversation beginning of this, like I think trying to separate what is logical and what is not, what makes sense and what doesn't, it's so subjective because it really does depend on what society thinks. You know what I mean? If you have a conspiracy that cannot be disproven or proven, and by definition, most of the time, like they're written in a way that's so subjective that you can't really say for sure whether something's occurs or not, except the birds aren't real movement, which I love because someone did that as a joke, suggested that birds were really robot spy drones and not real. And then the conspiracy theorists like jumped on it. And now it's an actual conspiracy theory.
I can't be having that. That's part of my income. And otherwise that whole pool of financial income is going to go to like a mechanic.
I am going to ruin our following right now by saying birds are the worst pets ever. I can't do birds as pets. I don't want them flying around my head. Just no.
If they stand in a row, though,
if they waddle and stay in a row, then we're good.
Well, all right. See, well, with what you're saying, they did bring back. I think we talked about it at some point. Maybe the dire wolf. They're trying to bring back the dodo. So, Steve, you might be taking that statement back soon. If yourself could own a dodo.
If I could have a large flightless attack bird as a pet.
Dodo's not attack, but the other two, you're getting 2 out of 3, man. You can't be picky. Bringing back extinct species.
The dodo is a large bird. It's got a hooked bill, so maybe it's sharp underneath. I could teach it. It's easy behavior science to teach it to be an attack bird. You know what I mean? Like that's the easy part from my perspective. Maybe an attack ostrich. That would be sweet. You're not coming to.
They attack already, don't they?
Yeah, but you have to train them to only attack intruders, is what I'm saying.
Your enemies. Gotcha.
Yes.
Yeah. Fair enough. We could just go around attacking willy nilly.
When I was in Africa, there's a couple ostriches on the preserve, and they're really attracted to like shiny things, and they'll peck at anything or like reflections too. So like it's like Jurassic World. Maybe you just need the laser beam, and then they'll go.
They'll just be attracted to my personality. It's just fun.
Ooh, there you go.
And on that note, my question that I was going to bring up was, so with these cults building their followers, because it seems like at times these individuals that join or seek it out are really like in it lost, or they themselves feel lost. So then do you think these can in a way like snowball, because when one person comes in and says, oh, this changed my life, that it's going to bring in more and more and more, and then also in a way it will just skew what they kind of like skew what they are, and so then they might become more extreme because the more and more people that they get with those ideas.
So I think that again, it's a generalization. You're going to have the people that feel lost searching for someone, and they are going to be very much susceptible to that. I think a lot of people will encounter a situation that they think, holy, like, wow, everything just makes so much sense to me all of a sudden. And they will think that they were lost before, and they'll convince themselves that they were lost and that this has helped them. And so through that process, I think now they are going around telling people that are lost, hey, look at how this helped me. And, you know, not everybody in the group is going to be part of that, but many of the members who brought in may be brought in because they feel that they're lost and they're just searching for something in society. And I think our social norms kind of build this idea that we're all lost and we all need to search for something, rather than kind of being comfortable where we are, because you need some level of motivation to keep trying to improve your life and moving forward one way or another. But what you're latching on for, or whether you are really in dire straits now or not, may or may be up to the interpretation of those around you and yourself. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And that's kind of a Western society thing in general, right? Like we aren't ever fully satisfied. Like no matter what level you're on, there's always something more to be attained, or like something that you're missing out on, or some guy has it made on social media and I'm not that, even though I'm happy otherwise. And
yeah, I think it's definitely more of a Western thought process, and it's a good thing to some extent, because it does motivate people to try to improve their lives. At least it should anyways, hopefully. I mean, for some people, it may actually cause just despair because they lack the control to actually be able to do that, or the skills. But I think it also leads us to not be comfortable in what we have and create some of these issues where we may latch on, like you're saying, to things that we wouldn't normally, because we're taught like never be satisfied. You know what I mean?
right.
Right. I'm sure we'll have a talk at some point about anxiety, and like, yes, anxiety can be debilitating and it feels horrible when you feel anxious. It's not a good feeling, but anxiety is also an important tool, because if you don't feel the anxiety when a deadline's approaching, then you have something you need to get done. And so you just don't have the motivation to do it. Now it's likely to be much more detrimental than it actually is helpful. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep.
I feel like we changed topics like 5 times back there. So I know I was trying to gently compare again the cults to religion in terms of like, so the flying spaghetti monster, for instance, you know, is recognized religion in some places, like I think Australia, New Zealand. I think United States, they have to let you wear the calendar on your head for your license picture, but they don't necessarily have the same religious protections. But it seems ridiculous to most people just because it's not, you know, in the social norm. But when we were talking back in the days of going from the Roman gods or the Greek gods to, you know, the God that is shared by Christianity and you know, Judaism and all these other, Islam, everything, all the current big religions, I'm sure it would have seemed just as ridiculous at that point as the flying spaghetti monster seems to us. And it's just the extent to which people think it makes sense and it's believable to them will determine what's ridiculous or not. And so we look at cult and all the time, we're like, how would you get sucked into that? That is, you know, ridiculous. It's silly. But looking at it from the outside in it, like, it's probably no different than what started happening at a different point in time in the history, except now we can, as a much larger group, communicate more and say, no, you know what, that's a little bit too weird for us. We're not going to join that one.
Yeah.
It's an interesting phenomenon in general to believe something based on what others believe and explain. And that is why we really take this, you know, kind of neutral stance when it comes to religions and even cults and other groups, unless they're doing something really dangerous or negative, is we as scientists study things that are verifiable and have data and we can actually test and prove. And religions, by definition, just require a trust, a belief that may not be verified. And, you know, you're told that you are questioning things that you shouldn't be questioning if you question them, because you just have to believe there's this deity out there. You know what I mean? And so that's why, and the podcast will try to not be judgmental about beliefs, because scientifically one isn't necessarily more or less logical than another, but in terms of
Mhm.
what people believe in social norms, there are some that are much more acceptable and believable than others. You know what I mean? And Manson got this idea in his head throughout this whole process of, you know, bringing on these followers, getting high. Basically, it was kind of like a harem. He was having sex with all the women, would allow some of the other men that joined him, depending on how much he liked them, to engage in those activities or not, what's going on. But it was a time of free love, so there was pretty acceptable. And also, it seems to be kind of how he brought in some of the larger figures in his group, was to let them have sex with, you know, the women in his group, and draw them in. Like, supposedly that's how he got Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys to join. The documentary I watched most recently talked a lot about all the venereal disease that was going around at the time. But there's two real things. Is one, he wanted to be a famous musician, and two, he truly believed, or at least seems like he truly believed, that the end of the world was coming because of a giant race war. And so it's hard to see where one deviates from the other, one you know, area of interest, because the Tate home, where the main attacks occurred, had been home to someone that was in the music industry that he had had contact with before. And so he went there previously looking for them, encountered Sharon Tate and some other people, and then you know, kind of went back to his group, and like, for several weeks nothing happened. But then, according to his followers, he became convinced that the only way to stop this race war from occurring was to have the black community, and I believe it was probably mostly the Black Panther community, but definitely the black community, to commit this crime and frame them so the police would crack down before they had a chance to start their race war against what, you know, he thought were his followers, the white people, basically.
Right.
And so, according to him, he never did this. He just planted the seed, planted the idea. But
That's like the big thing, right? Is like he never actually killed anybody.
Right. And supposedly he never actually, according to him, told anybody to kill anybody. He just planted the seed that these people needed to die and needs to be framed. And so he went into the movie actress Sharon Tate's home, murdered her, some other people on the premises. They killed a few other people around then, and eventually it all unraveled, and his whole group was found out, and he was arrested and in prison for the rest of his life. And so the idea of Helter Skelter, he got from the Beatles song that he thought was telling him that this race war was coming. And so I think, again, like, you have someone that's charismatic that people want to listen to. He's really getting into the spiritualism of the lifestyle, the hippie lifestyle. You know, their religion, I think, was nature and the things around them, not necessarily a deity other than him, but there was definitely a religious aspect to it. And you know, they brought it back into, okay, we're going to protect the earth, protect our people, protect ourselves, and murder some people, all based on the ravings of a delusional madman, you know? It seems like the sort of thing that you can see it happening in real time, and like why someone, like, people would latch on to somebody and like think that they have all the answers. But it's almost one of those like too strange for fiction type situations. You're like, someone couldn't have written this as well as it actually occurred, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. What was the Hail Bob comment one?
So that one was interesting. Heaven's Gate cult.
Heaven's Gate, that's right.
Yeah, and they were call it a UFO cult or a UFO religion. Presbyterian minister Marshall Applewhite started, you know,
Such a culty name. Such a culty name.
He started diving down like 1970s, really deep into his ideas of religion, building up, you know, pieces of different religions. I'm not sure. I was wondering there, and he was looking at like the book of Revelations and started coming up with the ideas of the end of days and, you know, going to heaven. And I was wondering, I never did find out, and maybe we can find out somewhere else, whether or not he took any pieces from Scientology just because the overlap with aliens and UFOs and that sort of thing. But
Oh yeah, yeah.
He came to believe that aliens were God, basically, and that the world was going to come to an end, and the only way to survive and move on to the next life was for everyone to end their lives with Kool-Aid. That's where the idea of drinking the Kool-Aid comes from.
Yeah.
If they all drank this poison Kool-Aid at the same time, that Hale-Bopp comet was flying overhead, and there was an alien spaceship hidden behind the comet that was going to pick up, I guess, their souls and take them to the next life, to heaven, or wherever it is.
Yep.
And we'll get it. We can get into like what people's beliefs and where they came from, and also. But to me, the part that's most interesting about this is the fact that if you believe in heaven, like, we've been to space, we know that it is not a physical place in this realm necessarily. This right here outside of Earth, like, it may physically exist somewhere, but if it did, it almost have to be in another dimension or something that we're not capable of understanding. It's not right there outside behind this comet. And so that is why, like, you leave your body, but your soul can, still travel there, supposedly, like, if that is part of your belief system. I found it really interesting and hard to comprehend how you would kill yourself and your soul would leave to go to a physical spaceship that's actually there, sitting out there in space. Like, how are you getting there? You know what I mean? Like, it would make more sense to try to build a spacecraft and fly out there to meet them than it would to just assume that my soul's going to get there.
I think you burst into the spaceship like the Kool-Aid Man. That's probably where that came from. Like, that's how you get in.
Until the wind blows the wrong direction that day, and then who knows what ship you're actually getting on.
Yeah. Souls are prone to the flow of the wind.
I mean, it's out of my realm of understanding what may or may not. Like, if you die in a Faraday cage, are you just stuck in limbo there, or how does that work? Like, I'm not sure. The Faraday cage, like the where no electronics work, and so you like.
I don't know what that is.
Oh, so like, people were making them for a while because they thought their phones were being tracked, and so they put them in there so their phone couldn't be tracked, but it doesn't work because it blocks all electronic signal.
Okay.
If you want to see one, like, in a movie, the best example I can think of was Enemy of the State with Will Smith back in the day. And the guy was like hacking whatever, and they went into his like big cage, and that way he could look stuff up and do all this, gather this information without being tracked.
Gotcha.
It's kind of like a real thing, but also a conspiracy thing. Like, all right, I'm gonna build a Faraday cage so nobody can track me and find my info and that sort of thing. So,
Steve, if you give your camera a 90-degree angle, everyone will have a perfect view of one.
I don't have quite enough room for my Faraday cage, but my
Windows just a
sitting over there. So,
oh man.
So now that I've been thoroughly derailed again, I find it like, mass suicide to get to heaven, if that is part of your belief, again, most people would think that's ridiculous, but in the confines of the cult, where you are sitting there and being taught that this is how it happens, if you believe that you are now going to heaven, that makes sense. But I do find it interesting that you were talking about joining an actual physical spaceship in a metaphysical form. You know what I mean? Like, it is strange to me.
Well, like it's the belief that your soul, non-physical, can inhabit your physical body. Maybe they thought it could like inhabit a physical spaceship.
And you wonder if anybody even thought that far into it, if they're like, nope, this guy is a genius, and we just believe him.
I love Kool-Aid. That's as far as I'm going to think about this.
Well, they drank the Kool-Aid.
Yeah. Well, what? Hold on a second. I gotta look real quick. I'm trying to remember. What flavor was the Kool-Aid is the real question. Let's see.
All right, betting. What's our bets?
I think it was red Kool-Aid.
I was thinking grape.
I feel like fruit punch. I would be more if it was.
Oh no!
I
know they were wearing Nikes.
Oh no! We're all wrong.
Wait a minute. If
We
it's a bad flavor,
we have created a false narrative here. We're either misremembering or it's just wrong. As according to the great Wikipedia, that it was phenobarbital mixed with applesauce or pudding and washed down with vodka.
It wasn't Kool-Aid?
I
was Kool-Aid?
thought I had heard that they were feeding the kids like the applesauce or something like that. All right, wait. You talked about it earlier, and I said I didn't know. I think I have learned that one before.
Yeah, no kidding.
Washing it down with vodka part, I don't remember.
That, just makes sense. But now we have to look up what is drinking the Kool-Aid. Where's that come from?
That's Jonestown.
No. Well, was it? We're mixed the two up. You're right.
Oh,
Jonestown.
Man. Yeah.
All right. So we've confused the two. Jonestown is where they drink the Kool-Aid. That's not Heaven's Gate.
What are we even doing, you guys? The premise was the same. It was a mass suicide, though, right?
I think we need to just give up on the whole podcast now. We're out here pushing false narratives, and
we fixed it now. That's all that matters. We recognize we are not perfect.
We're not research for these episodes, anyways. Come
on, you guys have a plan. And when you were talking about it earlier, how Kyle made this list of things, I'm like, oh no, I have to read a list.
I didn't know I'd have to look up what specific flavors of Kool-Aid everybody was drinking.
All right. So, yeah, I'm distraught now. That's all there is to it. But.
Well, I'm still curious what flavor of Kool-Aid it was, so I'm looking it up now.
I did not look up much of the Jonestown stuff just because there's a lot of overlap with that and like Waco, which I did look up a little bit more and stuff. But I am familiar with Jonestown. It is more of your traditional like. Go ahead.
Jim Jones was not. Jim Jones. It was grape flavored drink mix, but it was not actually Kool-Aid either. But it's associated with the Jonestown. It was actually a grape flavored drink mix called Flavor Aid, spelled Flav-R-Aid. Despite this, the phrase "drinking the Kool-Aid" became popular associated with this tragedy.
Well, I mean, this is like a Kleenex versus facial tissue conversation here. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't go with the brand name. You're leaving all your money. I know they were struggling financially, but you're leaving your money behind. You should probably just go with the good stuff. But Flavor Aid may be better. I don't know. I never had it, so I don't want to judge that product.
Do you think do you think this was too bad of bad PR?
They say there's no all PR is good PR, so I don't know. But
yeah.
Well, they didn't skip on the cyanide and diazepam, so.
Well, and you think about it, like if Kool-Aid wants to go with the route, like, listen, our stuff's so good, you won't even taste the poison. Like that's a pretty good selling point. You know what I mean?
It's true.
Now,
Flavor Aid is still around.
You're right, Steve.
I probably have tried it.
The Wikipedia page on Flavor Aid tells about how it's a non-carbonated soft drink beverage, and then instantly goes into the Jonestown Massacre.
I smell a sponsorship.
For us or for Jonestown?
For us. This week's episode, Cults, brought to you by Flavor Aid, drank by many.
Flavor Aid and
we are going to get a cease and desist email immediately. Please never talk about our project again or else.
Whoops.
Yeah, Jones sounds interesting though, because it's much more of like your traditional, like this person was like a preacher, a religious leader who then started going down their own rabbit hole and deciding like, like I am the leader, you all should follow me. And it didn't stray into what you may consider like with the ridiculous necessarily the same way that Heaven's Gate did with the UFOs and that sort of thing. Again, though, what's the real difference when it just depends on how far you're deviating from societal belief? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
yeah,
my wife always says that she would never be dumb enough to be sucked into a cult but she might be curious enough to see what they're doing to be sucked into a cult. And so,
I'm just here for the cookies.
yeah, like
Hmm.
I
Don't
just
mind
want
me.
to
Are drinks supplied?
please no, please no.
No flavor aid, please. I brought my own. Brought my mug.
One thing that's
Uh,
interesting though with all the groups too is like they usually do start off kind of making a little sense if you believe their general premise. You know what I mean? Like, all right, I've talked to God. God has given me this message. I need to forward it on to people. And then it starts going off the rails, like we said, almost the same way with the Nobel's disease. We're like, all right, David Koresh out there, Waco has their whole town set up. They're all kind of,
mhm.
sequestered away from everyone else. And within a few years now, or a few years towards the end, anyways, like you're there with your family, husband, wife, children, but only he's allowed to have sex with all the women now.
Right.
And supposedly even abusing some of the children and that sort of thing, but because he's the religious leader, that's his right. And I'm probably overgeneralizing a little bit, but it seems like a very man thing to just be like, you know what, I've got the control here, I'm going to use it to my benefit and just take advantage of every situation.
Sure.
But again, you have to assume he probably was convincing himself like, hey, because I'm God, this is actually a good thing. I'm actually helping these people. I'm making them part divine or something like along those lines. And so it is not, if anybody else did it would be horrible, but they're not me. This is kind of the feeling I get.
And I'd be
Yeah.
really curious with these individuals that take on this role as like the leader, like when they start out, if they start out from like a maybe not like full blown like, or what their like ideas got to be, as let's say like intensity is how I'll word it, where they start pretty like minor, but then have we seen any like progression as time goes where they sit with certain ideas and then they're like, oh, this just isn't enough for me, it's not cutting it, and so then they tell everyone, oh, I actually have had this idea that God has talked to me and we need to do this also, and then this and this and this, and so then like
Well,
nothing is never enough.
you see what you can get away with too. Like when I'm stealing from a candy store, I'm not like starting off with a bank, I'm like taking the Tootsie Roll from the counter and not getting caught. That history develops like, hey, like I can get away with this. Like, let's try this idea. Or, like there's no punishment contingency at all. Like no one's like, hey, this is ridiculous what you're doing. You just keep going, just people just buy in to every word.
Yeah, it's especially, I mean, you have to look at each one individually too. Like if there's a lot of money involved, then all right, how far can I push this money thing? And people aren't giving me money as much anymore. I'm going to be like, all right, I got a message from God. We need to pull all our money and build this spaceship. You know what I mean? Or I think just to pull it back to Kyle's always pulling in the Simpsons in the episodes in this, like when Homer joins the cult and they decide they're going to build a spaceship, but then it was just like a guy on a bicycle with like a foam and a little piece of paper making the hover sound.
They try so hard to brainwash Homer, and he's just not duped at all. But the phrase that gets him is they try to get him to like the leader, and he's like, whatever about the leader. Like they finally get him with the no leader.
No, leader. Yeah.
Batman,
I mean leader.
Batman, I mean leader.
So yeah,
I love the leader.
Money, power, drugs, sex, probably all the things that affect everything in like human history. I mean, really comes down to those same basic facts, except that they're taking the tact, and I think in many cases actually believing that they are, the leaders of the gods, the deity themselves, whether or not it's part of the God of Christianity or another, entity. One way or the other, it all falls back down to that. And I think it really does come to that repeated things like everybody says I'm that great. I think I'm that great. Look at the power I have of people. It's like that circle of reasoning. Well, I wouldn't be able to lead these people if I wasn't really selected by God. And God wouldn't select me if I wasn't meant to lead these people. But
there you go.
To bring it back behavior analytically, reinforcers are reinforcers. You know what I mean? Like at the moment of conception, food, I guess, a little bit longer, but even in young childhood, sexual stimulation, these are all like primary reinforcers, things that will increase the future frequency of the behavior that they follow. And then money is what we call a generalized reinforcer, where because it can help you access every other reinforcer in the world, basically, it in itself becomes reinforcing, even though it has no actual reinforcing value in and of itself until it obtains it. And so if you really want to get down to it, it's all just basic reinforcement, truthfully. Like seeing how these end too is always interesting, like the different paths they go down. So like Jonestown, again, I didn't look it up, but if I remember correctly, it was failing. They had this whole area set up, they had their commune, their houses, everything, and like people were leaving, people were having health issues, they were running out of money. And so whether or not he consciously said, okay, let's kill this off because I don't want to deal with the consequences of losing it all, or whether he talked himself into believing that this is how we're going to go to heaven now, is by, you know, drinking the drink altogether. One way or the other, that led to that conclusion. Whereas in Waco, David Koresh really believed that the end of the world was coming because of the U.S. government. And so they started building and stockpiling weapons, bombs, you know, grenades, that sort of thing. And then I think they were buying supplies and building them themselves in workshops that like the people they were working in. And then, of course, the ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearm, found out about it. And they're like, hey, we're going to have to do something because these guys might get dangerous. And set off like the famous standoff where ATF and FBI agents are getting shot. Everybody in the home ends up getting shot, or at one point gets set on fire, and just a massacre that looks bad at all ends. And I'm not going to take sides on who is right or wrong, but it's like, talk about self-fulfilling prophecy, that by amassing these weapons, you created the situation that you said was going to happen beforehand, you know? I think that the main idea is just that these things all seem to happen somehow randomly, organically. I doubt most of these people planned to create these scenarios, at least in terms of it being a cult, and then, you know, kind of happen in letting basically behavior make its own path without letting societal influence is probably what makes a cult, just because you can say, like, most people be like, this is weird stuff going on, maybe you guys shouldn't do that. But if you cut that out, now the behavior can almost get kind of chaotic and random, and what's reinforced and what's punished. And I think that's usually why you would see someone, a family member, friend, or just a random person, be like, I would have never thought they'd be in a cult, but here we are. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. When social influence is removed from the equation, and your own society that you've essentially joined or become part of, that's excluded itself from the rest of the echoes of society, and like which governs like what's acceptable and what's not, then suddenly you've got your own, anything could happen.
Yeah.
And probably will.
All right, I think that's about, I don't know, we're out of things to say. I was gonna say out of time, but we don't have a time limit. We just don't have anything else to say. So remember to let us know anything you want us to analyze, talk about on here. Go to the doc analyzes anything at gmail.com, and Kyle will put it in the show notes. And then just remember that this is all for fun. Don't go away from this stressing out about whether your loved one's going to be in a cult. Try not to take life too seriously, because someday the sun is going to go into its next phase and envelop the earth, and none of this will matter. So just sit back and enjoy the ride.
On that note, everyone have a great day.
All right, goodbye, everyone.